The screen flickered to life, casting a pale glow across the dimly lit room. You leaned closer, your breath catching in your throat as the words began to scroll across the monitor. Asterisk, congratulations, you've awakened the sleeping beast. Asterisk, at first it felt like a joke, some kind of prank or glitch in the system. But the cold knot forming in your stomach told you otherwise. This wasn't a game. This wasn't a mistake. Something had been set in motion, something ancient, something alive. And it was all because of you. It started innocently enough. You were just doing your job, sifting through lines of code, analyzing data streams and running diagnostics on the system. You'd done it 1,000 times before. But this time something was different. A single line of code, buried deep in the archives, caught your eye. It was old, older than anything you'd ever seen. The syntax was strange, almost alien, and yet it felt familiar. Like a whisper from a forgotten dream. Against your better judgment, you ran it. And that's when everything changed. The room seemed to hold its breath as the system came alive. Lights flickered, screens flashed, and a low hum filled the air, growing louder and louder until it felt like the walls themselves were vibrating. You stumbled back, your heart pounding in your chest as the words appeared on the screen. Asterisk, initializing awakening sequence. Asterisk, panic surged through you. What had you done? What had you unleashed? Before you could react, the ground beneath you trembled, a deep, resonant rumble that seemed to come from the very core of the earth. The air grew thick, charged with an energy you couldn't explain. And then it spoke. Not in words, not in any language you could understand, but in a way that bypassed your ears and went straight to your soul. It was a presence, vast and ancient, stirring from a slumber that had lasted eons. And it was angry. You weren't alone in feeling it. Across the city, people stopped in their tracks, their faces pale, their eyes wide with fear. Dogs howled, birds took to the sky in a chaotic frenzy, and the streets filled with the sound of car alarms blaring in unison. It was as if the world itself had sensed the awakening and was screaming in warning. But you knew the truth. This wasn't just some natural phenomenon. This was something far older, far more powerful than anything humanity had ever faced. And it was coming. Your mind raced as you tried to make sense of what was happening. Who, or what, had you awakened? Why had it been sleeping? And more importantly, what did it want? The answers were out there, buried in the fragments of code you'd stumbled upon. But time was running out. The beast was stirring, its presence growing stronger with every passing second. You could feel it in the air, in the ground, in the very fabric of reality. It was coming, and when it arrived, nothing would ever be the same. You glanced at the screen one last time, your fingers trembling as you typed in a desperate command. The system responded with a single chilling message. Asterisk, prepare for contact. Asterisk, your heart sank. There was no turning back now. The beast was awake and it was coming for you. For all of us. The question was, could humanity survive what was coming? Or had you just signed our death warrant? The screen went dark, leaving you in silence. But the fear, the dread, the overwhelming sense of impending doom, it lingered. You knew this was only the beginning. The beast was awake and it was hungry. And as the first tremors of its arrival shook the ground beneath your feet, you realized something even more terrifying. This wasn't just its story anymore. It was yours. And it was far from over. The silence that followed was deafening. You sat there, staring at the blank screen, your mind racing but your body frozen. The hum in the air had faded, but the weight of what you'd done pressed down on you like a physical force. Your hands shook as you reached for the keyboard again, but you stopped yourself. What if typing something else made it worse? What if the beast, whatever it was watching, waiting for you to make another mistake? The thought sent a chill down your spine. You weren't just dealing with a machine or a program. This was something else entirely. Something alive. Something aware. You forced yourself to stand, your legs unsteady beneath you. The room felt smaller now, the walls closing in as if they too were reacting to the presence you'd awakened. You needed answers and you needed them fast. But where do you even start? The code. It had to be the key. That strange ancient line of code you'd found, it wasn't random. It was a trigger. A lock. And you just opened it. Your mind flashed back to the moment you'd first seen it. It had been buried in a forgotten folder, labeled with a string of numbers and letters that didn't make sense. At the time, you'd thought it was just another piece of outdated junk, the kind of thing that gets lost in the system over the years. But now you realized how wrong you'd been. That code wasn't junk. It was a warning. A seal. And you'd broken it. You grabbed your phone, your fingers fumbling as you dialed the only person you could think of who might be able to help. They picked up on the second ring, their voice groggy with sleep. "Do you have any idea what time it is?" they grumbled. You didn't bother with apologies. "I need you to come to the lab. It's, it's an emergency. There was a pause on the other end and then the sound of movement. What kind of emergency? They asked, their tone sharper now. You swallowed hard, your throat dry. The kind that could end the world. By the time they arrived, you'd already started pulling up every file, every record, every scrap of data you could find that might explain what was happening. Your colleague, let's call them Alex, burst into the room, their hair disheveled and their coat thrown on haphazardly. They took one look at you, pale and shaking, and their annoyance melted into concern. What's going on? They asked, their voice low and serious. You gestured to the screen where the cryptic message still lingered. Asterisk, prepare for contact. Asterisk. Alex's eyes widened as they read it. What the hell is this? They whispered. You didn't have an answer. Not a real one anyway. All you could do was show them the code, the strange alien syntax that had started it all. Alex leaned in, their brow furrowing as they studied it. This doesn't look like anything I've ever seen, they said slowly. It's not just old. Different. Like it's from another system entirely. You nodded, your stomach churning. That was the feeling you'd had too. It wasn't just unfamiliar, it was otherworldly. Together you began to dig deeper, pulling up archives and cross-referencing data. The more you searched, the more unsettling the picture became. The code wasn't just a one-off. It was part of something much larger, a network of files and programs that had been hidden away, deliberately erased from the main system. Whoever, or whatever, had created it didn't want it found. And yet, here it was, staring back at you from the screen. As you worked, the tremors started again. At first, they were faint, little more than a vibration in the floor. But they grew stronger, more frequent, until the entire building seemed to shake. You and Alex exchanged a glance, the same unspoken question hanging between you. Was this the beast? Was it getting closer? The thought was enough to make your blood run cold. Then the lights flickered. Not just in the lab but across the entire city. You could see it through the window, the skyline going dark in patches, like a giant hand was snuffing out the lights one by one. The hum returned, louder this time, a deep, resonant sound that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. It wasn't just in the air, it was in your bones, in your teeth, in the very core of your being. And with it came that presence again, that overwhelming sense of something vast and ancient and angry. Alex grabbed your arm, their grip tight. We need to get out of here, they said, their voice trembling. But you shook your head. No, we can't. Not yet. We need to figure out what this is. If we don't, you didn't finish the sentence. You didn't need to. The look in Alex's eyes told you they understood. If you didn't find a way to stop this, there might not be a world left to save. You turned back to the screen, your fingers flying over the keyboard as you tried to piece together the fragments of data. It was like trying to solve a puzzle with half the pieces missing, but you didn't have a choice. You had to try. As you worked, a pattern began to emerge. The code wasn't just a trigger, it was a map. A blueprint. And it pointed to something buried deep beneath the city, something that had been there long before the first skyscraper was built. The tremors grew stronger, the hum louder, and the presence more oppressive. You could feel it now, a pressure in your mind, a weight on your soul. It was searching, probing, reaching out for something, or someone. It was looking for you. The realization hit you like a punch to the gut. You hadn't just awakened the beast. You'd drawn its attention. And it wasn't going to stop until it found you. Alex's voice broke through the haze of fear. We need to go. Now. This time you didn't argue. You grabbed your bag, shoving your laptop and a handful of flash drives inside, and followed them out the door. The streets were chaos, people running in every direction, their faces etched with panic. The sky was dark, the stars blotted out by a thick, unnatural cloud that seemed to pulse with energy. And beneath it all, the ground continued to shake, the tremors growing stronger with every passing second. You didn't know where you were going, only that you had to keep moving. The beast was awake and it was coming. But as you ran, a single thought kept echoing in your mind. What had you unleashed? And more importantly, how could you stop it? The answers were out there, buried in the code, in the data, in the secrets of the past. But time was running out. The beast was coming. And when it arrived, nothing would ever be the same. The streets were a blur of chaos and fear. You and Alex pushed through the panicked crowds, your breaths coming in ragged gasps as you ran. The tremors were relentless now, the ground shaking so violently that it felt like the city itself was being torn apart. Above you, the sky churned with that unnatural cloud, its edges flickering with bursts of light that didn't look like lightning. It was as if the heavens were reacting to the beast's awakening, the very fabric of reality straining under its weight. You didn't know where you were going, only that you had to keep moving. The data you'd managed to save was your only hope, the only clue to what you'd unleashed and how to stop it. But the weight of the beast's presence was suffocating, pressing down on you with every step. It was in your mind now, a low, insistent hum that made it hard to think, hard to focus. You could feel it searching, probing, reaching out for you. It knew you were the one who had awakened it. And it wasn't going to stop until it found you. Alex grabbed your arm, pulling you into an alleyway as a car careened past, its driver blinded by panic. "We can't keep running like this," they said, their voice barely audible over the din. "We need a plan. We need to figure out what's going on before it's too late." You nodded, your chest heaving as you tried to catch your breath. They were right. Running wasn't going to save you. Not from this. You pulled out your laptop, your hands trembling as you opened it. The screen flickered to life, the strange code still displayed, its alien syntax glowing faintly in the dim light. Alex leaned in, their eyes scanning the lines. "There has to be something here," they muttered. "Something we're missing." You nodded, your mind racing. The code was a map, a blueprint. But to what? And where did it lead? As you scrolled through the files, a new pattern began to emerge. The code wasn't just pointing to something beneath the city, it was pointing to a specific location. An old, abandoned facility on the outskirts of town, one that had been sealed off for decades. The records were sparse, but what little you could find was enough to send a chill down your spine. The facility had been part of a secret government project, one that had been shut down after a series of unexplained incidents. Incidents that sounded eerily similar to what was happening now. You looked up at Alex, your heart pounding. "We need to get to this facility," you said, your voice barely above a whisper. "If there's any chance of stopping this, it's there." Alex hesitated, their eyes darting to the chaos around you. "And how do you propose we do that?" they asked. "The city's falling apart. We'll never make it." You clenched your fists, desperation clawing at your chest. "We have to try. If we don't, this thing, it's going to destroy everything." The decision was made in silence, the weight of it settling over you like a shroud. You didn't know what you'd find at the facility, or if you'd even make it there alive. But you had no other choice. The beast was coming, and you were the only one who could stop it. The journey was a nightmare. The streets were clogged with abandoned cars and fleeing people, the air thick with smoke and the acrid smell of burning metal. The tremors grew stronger with every passing minute, the ground cracking open in places, swallowing buildings whole. The sky was a swirling mass of darkness, the cloud pulsing with an eerie, otherworldly light. And through it all, the hum persisted, a constant, oppressive presence that made it hard to think, hard to breathe. By the time you reached the facility, you were exhausted, your legs shaking with every step. The building loomed ahead of you, a hulking, decaying structure surrounded by a rusted fence. The gate was padlocked, but the chain had long since corroded, and it gave way with a single forceful tug. You and Alex exchanged a glance, the same unspoken fear reflected in each other's eyes. Whatever was inside, it wasn't going to be good. The interior of the facility was even worse than you'd imagined. The walls were lined with faded, peeling paint, the floors littered with debris and broken equipment. The air was thick with dust and the faint, metallic tang of something you couldn't quite place. But it was the silence that was the most unnerving. After the chaos of the city, the stillness here felt unnatural, almost oppressive. It was as if the building itself was holding its breath, waiting for something. You followed the map, the code guiding you deeper into the facility. The further you went, the more the air seemed to hum with that same oppressive energy. It was stronger here, more concentrated, as if you were getting closer to the source. Your heart pounded in your chest, your palms slick with sweat as you pushed open a heavy, rusted door and stepped into a large, cavernous room. The sight that greeted you made your blood run cold. The room was filled with machinery, ancient and corroded, but still humming with a faint, unnatural light. In the center of the room was a massive, circular platform, its surface etched with strange, glowing symbols that matched the code you'd seen. And above it, suspended in midair, was something. It was hard to describe, harder still to comprehend. It was like a tear in reality itself, a swirling, pulsating void that seemed to stretch into infinity. And from it, you could feel the presence of the beast, stronger than ever, its anger and hunger radiating out in waves. Alex stumbled back, their face pale. What is that?" they whispered, their voice trembling. You didn't have an answer. All you knew was that this was the source. This was where the beast had been sleeping. And now it was awake. The hum grew louder, the air crackling with energy as the void began to pulse faster, brighter. You could feel the beast's presence growing stronger, closer, as if it was reaching out from the void, trying to break through. Your mind raced, your thoughts a jumbled mess of fear and desperation. You had to do something. But what? The code had brought you here, but it hadn't given you the answers you needed. Not yet. And then, the ground beneath you began to shake again, harder this time, the tremors so violent that you could barely stay on your feet. The void pulsed, its edges flickering as something began to emerge. A shape, dark and indistinct, but growing clearer with every passing second. The beast was coming. You turned to Alex, your voice barely above a whisper. We need to stop it. Now. But before they could respond, the void erupted, a blinding flash of light that sent you both stumbling back. And when the light faded, the beast was there, its form towering over you, its eyes burning with a cold, ancient fury. The climax was here. The beast had arrived. And as it loomed over you, its presence crushing, its hunger palpable, you realized one terrifying truth. This wasn't just about survival anymore. This was about the fate of the world. And you were the only one who could stop it. The beast's form was unlike anything you could have imagined. It wasn't just a creature. It was a force, a living embodiment of something far beyond human understanding. Its shape shifted and writhed as if it couldn't decide what it wanted to be, but its eyes, those stayed the same. Cold, ancient, and filled with a rage that made your knees buckle. You could feel its gaze on you, piercing through your very soul, and you knew it recognized you. You were the one who had awakened it. You were the one it wanted. Alex grabbed your arm, their grip tight enough to bruise. We need to move. Now. But you couldn't. Your feet felt rooted to the spot, your body frozen in terror as the beast loomed closer. The air around it crackled with energy, the hum growing louder, more oppressive, until it felt like your skull might split open. And then it spoke. Not in words, but in a voice that echoed in your mind, raw and guttural, filled with a hatred that made your stomach churn. You. The sound of its voice broke the spell, and you stumbled back, nearly tripping over your own feet. Alex pulled you toward the door, but the beast was faster. With a roar that shook the walls, it lunged, its massive form crashing into the machinery around it, sending sparks and debris flying in every direction. You and Alex dove for cover, the heat of the explosion searing your skin as you hit the ground. The room was chaos, the air thick with smoke and the acrid smell of burning metal. But through it all, you could still feel the beast's presence, its anger, its hunger. It wasn't going to stop. Not until it had you. You scrambled to your feet, your mind racing. The code. It had to be the key. You didn't know how, but it was the only thing you had left. You pulled out your laptop, your hands shaking so badly you could barely type. The screen flickered, the strange symbols glowing faintly in the dim light. You didn't understand them, not fully, but you knew they were connected to the beast. They had to be. Alex crouched beside you, their eyes darting between the screen and the beast, which was now tearing through the room, its massive form crushing everything in its path. What are you doing? They hissed, their voice barely audible over the chaos. We need to get out of here. You shook your head, your fingers flying over the keyboard. No. This is the only way. If we can't stop it here, it's going to destroy everything. The city. The world. Everything. The words were barely out of your mouth when the beast roared again, the sound so loud it felt like your eardrums might burst. You looked up just in time to see it charging toward you, its eyes blazing with fury. You froze, your heart pounding in your chest, but Alex grabbed your arm and yanked you out of the way just as the beast's massive form crashed into the wall behind you. The impact sent a shockwave through the room, knocking you both to the ground. Your laptop skidded across the floor, the screen flickering as it landed a few feet away. You scrambled toward it, your hands trembling as you picked it up. The screen was cracked, but it was still working, the strange symbols glowing faintly. You didn't have time to think, to plan. You just acted. Typing furiously, you pulled up the code, your mind racing as you tried to make sense of it. There had to be something here, something you could use to stop the beast. But what? And then you saw it. A pattern, hidden in the chaos of symbols and numbers. It wasn't just a map, it was a sequence. A sequence that matched the symbols on the platform in the center of the room. Your breath caught in your throat as you realized what it meant. The platform wasn't just a gateway. It was a lock. And the code was the key. You turned to Alex, your voice barely above a whisper. I think I know how to stop it. They stared at you, their eyes wide with fear and disbelief. How? They asked, their voice trembling. You didn't answer. Instead, you grabbed their hand and pulled them toward the platform, your heart pounding in your chest. The beast was still tearing through the room, its roars shaking the walls, but you didn't have time to think about that. You had to act. Now. As you reached the platform, you began typing furiously, entering the sequence from the code. The symbols on the platform began to glow brighter, the hum growing louder, more intense. The beast roared again, its voice filled with rage and something else, fear. It knew what you were doing. And it wasn't going to let you finish. You typed faster, your fingers flying over the keys as the beast charged toward you. Alex stood beside you, their eyes darting between the screen and the beast, their face pale with fear. "Hurry," they whispered, their voice barely audible over the chaos. You didn't need to be told twice. With a final keystroke, you entered the last symbol, and the platform erupted in a blinding flash of light. For a moment, everything was still. The beast froze, its massive form silhouetted against the light, its eyes wide with shock. And then, with a roar that shook the very foundations of the building, it was pulled toward the platform, its form twisting and writhing as it was dragged into the void. The light grew brighter, the hum louder, until it felt like your skull might split open. And then, with a final deafening roar, the beast was gone. The room fell silent, the air thick with the smell of smoke and burning metal. You and Alex stood there, your breaths coming in ragged gasps, your bodies trembling with exhaustion and fear. It was over. The beast was gone. But as you looked at the platform, at the symbols still glowing faintly, you realized something that made your blood run cold. The void was still there. And it was growing. The platform began to shake, the symbols flickering as the void pulsed with a faint, unnatural light. You could feel it, the same oppressive presence, the same ancient anger. The beast was gone, but something else was coming. Something worse. Alex grabbed your arm, their voice trembling. "What's happening?" they asked, their eyes wide with fear. You didn't have an answer. All you knew was that this wasn't over. Not yet. The void was still open, still growing. And whatever was on the other side, it was coming. And this time you might not be able to stop it. The void pulsed, its edges flickering with an eerie, otherworldly light. The platform beneath your feet trembled violently, the symbols etched into its surface glowing brighter with each passing second. You could feel it, the pressure in the air, the hum in your bones, the presence of something vast and ancient stirring on the other side of the void. The beast was gone, but the gateway was still open. And whatever was coming through next, it was worse. Much worse. Alex's grip on your arm tightened, their voice barely audible over the growing hum. "What do we do?" they asked, their eyes wide with panic. You didn't have an answer. The code had closed the void once, but it had also opened it. You couldn't risk using it again. Not without knowing what would happen. But you were out of time. The void was expanding, its edges creeping closer, the light growing brighter, more intense. You could feel the heat now, a searing wave that made your skin prickle and your eyes water. And then you saw it. A shape, dark and indistinct, began to form in the center of the void. It was smaller than the beast, but somehow more terrifying. Its form shifted and writhed as if it was made of shadows, and its eyes, cold, calculating, and filled with a malice that made your blood run cold, locked onto yours. It wasn't just a creature. It was a predator. And it was coming for you. You stumbled back, your mind racing. There had to be a way to close the void, to stop whatever was coming through. But how? The code was the key, but it was also the lock. You couldn't use it without risking making things worse. And then it hit you. The platform. The symbols. They weren't just part of the gateway, they were part of the control system. If you could disrupt them, maybe you could shut it down. You turned to Alex, your voice urgent. "We need to destroy the platform. Now." They stared at you, their face pale. "How?" they asked, their voice trembling. You didn't have time to explain. Instead, you grabbed a piece of broken machinery from the floor, its edges sharp and jagged, and slammed it into the nearest symbol. The platform shuddered, the light flickering, but the void remained. It wasn't enough. Alex didn't hesitate. They grabbed another piece of debris and joined you, their hands shaking as they struck the symbols again and again. The platform trembled, the hum growing louder, more erratic. The void pulsed, its edges flickering as the shape within it grew clearer, more defined. It was almost through. You could feel its presence now, a cold, calculating intelligence that made your skin crawl. It was watching you. Waiting. With a final, desperate strike, you shattered one of the central symbols. The platform erupted in a burst of light, the hum reaching a deafening crescendo. The void flickered, its edges wavering as the shape within it let out a sound, a low, guttural growl that made your stomach churn. And then, with a final, blinding flash, the void collapsed, the light fading to nothingness. The room fell silent, the air thick with the smell of smoke and burning metal. You and Alex stood there, your breaths coming in ragged gasps, your bodies trembling with exhaustion and fear. It was over. The void was closed. The beast was gone. And whatever had been coming through, it was gone too. For a moment you allowed yourself to believe it. To believe that you'd won. That you'd stopped it. But then you felt it. A faint, almost imperceptible hum, like the echo of a distant memory. You looked down at the platform at the shattered symbols and your heart sank. The void was closed, but the gateway, it was still there. Dormant. Waiting. Alex turned to you, their face pale. "Is it over?" they asked, their voice trembling. You didn't answer. Instead, you knelt down, your fingers brushing against the shattered symbols. The hum grew louder, more insistent, and you realized with a sinking feeling that you hadn't stopped it. Not really. You just delayed it. The gateway was still there, buried beneath the surface, waiting for someone, or something, to open it again. And then you saw it. A single, faintly glowing symbol, hidden beneath the debris. It was different from the others, its shape more intricate, more deliberate. You didn't know what it meant, but you knew one thing. This wasn't over. Not yet. The gateway was still there. And so was the code. You looked up at Alex, your voice barely above a whisper. "We need to go. Now." They didn't argue. Together, you ran, your footsteps echoing through the empty halls of the facility. The city was in ruins, the sky still dark, the air thick with the smell of smoke and ash. But as you stepped outside, you realized something that made your blood run cold. The hum was still there. Faint but unmistakable. And it was growing. The final twist came as you reached the edge of the city. The sky, once dark and churning, began to clear, the unnatural cloud dissipating as if it had never been there. The tremors stopped, the ground growing still beneath your feet. For a moment, it felt like the world was healing. Like you'd won. But then you saw it. A single, faintly glowing symbol, etched into the ground at your feet. It was the same symbol you'd seen on the platform, the same one that had been hidden beneath the debris. And as you stared at it, you realized the truth. The gateway wasn't just in the facility. It was everywhere. The code, the symbols, the hum. They were part of something much larger. Something that had been there long before you, long before the city, long before humanity itself. And it wasn't just a gateway. It was a warning. A warning that you'd ignored. A warning that you'd broken. And now it was too late. The gateway was open. And whatever was on the other side, it was coming. The symbol glowed faintly at your feet, its light pulsing in a rhythm that matched the hum still lingering in the air. You stared at it, your mind racing, your heart pounding in your chest. The city around you was eerily quiet, the chaos of the past hours replaced by an unnatural stillness. It felt like the calm after a storm, but you knew better. This wasn't over. Not yet. Alex stood beside you, their face pale, their eyes wide with fear. "What is that?" they whispered, their voice trembling. You didn't have an answer. All you knew was that the symbol was connected to the gateway, to the void, to the beast. And now it was here, etched into the ground like a scar on the earth itself. You knelt down, your fingers brushing against the symbol. It was warm, almost alive, and the hum grew louder as you touched it. The realization hit you like a punch to the gut. The gateway wasn't just in the facility. It was everywhere. The symbols, the code, the hum, they were part of a network, a system that spanned the entire city, maybe even the entire world. And you just activated it. The beast had been the first to come through, but it wasn't the last. Whatever was on the other side of the void, it was coming. And there was no way to stop it. You stood up, your legs shaking beneath you. "We need to warn people," you said, your voice barely above a whisper. Alex nodded, their face grim. "But who's going to believe us?" they asked. "After everything that's happened, they'll think we're crazy." You didn't have an answer to that either. All you knew was that you had to try. The city was in ruins, but there were still people out there, still lives that could be saved. And if you couldn't stop what was coming, maybe you could at least give them a chance. Together, you made your way through the empty streets, the symbol's glow fading behind you but the hum still lingering in the air. The city was a ghost town, the buildings dark and silent, the streets littered with debris and abandoned cars. It felt like the end of the world. And maybe it was. As you walked, you began to see signs of life, people peeking out from behind curtains, others huddled together in doorways, their faces pale with fear. You tried to warn them, to tell them what was coming, but most just stared at you with blank, disbelieving eyes. A few listened, their faces growing pale as you spoke, but even they didn't seem to know what to do. Where could they go? How could they escape something that was everywhere? The hours blurred together, the sky growing darker as night fell. The hum never faded, a constant, oppressive presence that made it hard to think, hard to breathe. You and Alex kept moving, kept trying to warn people, but it felt like a losing battle. The city was too big, the danger too vast. And then, just as you were about to give up, you saw it. A light. Faint but unmistakable. It was coming from a building up ahead, its windows glowing with a warm, golden light. You and Alex exchanged a glance, the same unspoken question hanging between you. Who would still have power in a city like this? Cautiously, you approached the building, your footsteps echoing in the empty street. The door was slightly ajar and you pushed it open, your heart pounding in your chest. Inside, the building was alive with activity. People moved about, their faces tense but determined, their voices low and urgent. In the center of the room was a large table, covered with maps and papers, and standing over it was a woman, her face lined with exhaustion but her eyes sharp and focused. She looked up as you entered, her gaze locking onto yours. You, she said, her voice firm. You're the ones who activated the gateway. You froze, your mind racing. How did she know? Who was she? The woman stepped forward, her eyes never leaving yours. My name is Dr. Elena Reyes, she said. I've been studying the gateway for years. Trying to understand it. Trying to stop it. And now, thanks to you, it's too late. Her words hit you like a punch to the gut. You wanted to explain, to tell her it wasn't your fault, that you hadn't known what you were doing. But the look in her eyes stopped you. She wasn't blaming you. She was stating a fact. And now she needed your help. Over the next few hours, Dr. Reyes filled you in on everything she knew. The gateway wasn't just a portal, it was a bridge between dimensions, a connection to a world that existed parallel to ours. A world filled with beings like the beast, ancient and powerful, hungry for the energy of our world. The symbols, the code, the hum, they were all part of a system designed to keep the gateway closed, to keep those beings out. But something had gone wrong. The system had been damaged, corrupted. And now it was failing. We've been trying to repair it, Dr. Reyes said, her voice heavy with exhaustion. But we don't have the resources, the knowledge. We've been fighting a losing battle. She looked at you, her eyes filled with a desperate hope. But you've seen the code. You've been inside the system. Maybe, just maybe, you can help us fix it. You didn't know if you could. You didn't even know if it was possible. But you knew you had to try. Together with Dr. Reyes and her team, you worked through the night, poring over maps and data, trying to piece together the fragments of the system. The hum grew louder, more insistent, and you could feel the presence of the other world pressing in, its hunger growing stronger with every passing minute. And then, just as the first light of dawn began to creep over the horizon, you found it. A pattern hidden in the chaos of symbols and numbers. A way to reset the system, to close the gateway for good. It wasn't a perfect solution. It would take time, energy, and a sacrifice you weren't sure you were ready to make. But it was the only chance you had. The final moments were a blur. The hum reached a deafening crescendo, the air crackling with energy as the gateway began to open again. You stood at the center of the room, your hands trembling as you entered the final sequence. The symbols on the maps glowed brighter, the hum growing louder, more intense. And then, with a final blinding flash of light, it was over. The hum faded, the air growing still. The gateway was closed. The other world was sealed off. But the cost was high. The system was damaged beyond repair, the symbols fading into nothingness. The gateway was gone, but so was the protection it had provided. The other world was still there, still hungry, still waiting. And now there was nothing to keep it out. As the sun rose over the city, you stood there, your body trembling with exhaustion, your mind reeling from everything that had happened. The city was quiet, the streets empty, the buildings dark. It felt like the end of the world. And maybe it was. But it was also a new beginning. You looked at Alex, at Dr. Reyes, at the few people who had survived the night. They were scared, exhausted, but there was a determination in their eyes, a resolve that hadn't been there before. They knew what was coming. They knew the danger. And they were ready to fight. The final twist came as you stepped outside, the first rays of sunlight warming your skin. The symbol was still there, etched into the ground at your feet. But it was different now. Fainter, almost imperceptible. And as you stared at it, you realized the truth. The gateway was closed, but the connection wasn't gone. Not completely. The other world was still there, still waiting. And one day it would find a way back. But for now the city was safe. The people were safe. And you had done what you could. It wasn't a perfect ending. It wasn't even a happy one. But it was an ending. And sometimes that's enough. As you walked away, the symbol fading behind you, you couldn't help but feel a sense of hope. The world was broken, but it wasn't beyond repair. The gateway was closed, but the fight wasn't over. And as long as there were people willing to stand up, to fight back, there was a chance. A chance to rebuild. A chance to survive. A chance to live. And that, in the end, was all that mattered.